Okay, let's get started. So, first of all, it's not required that you need to put your video on, so you guys don't need to put your video on. Anyway, welcome to the summer session for the Chess for Unity beginner chess lessons. So, the aim for this session is to let you learn chess, learn how the pieces move, and learn a lot more than that as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. All right. So, yeah, welcome to the chess class. My name is Eric Liu, and I have played chess for 8 years. I started when I was 8 years old. I am an international master at chess. I have a lot of tournament accomplishments, and that's a picture of me 3 years ago. So, we're here to learn about chess. What is chess? Chess is a popular board game, and it's a one it's a one v one chess game. It's a 1v1 game. It's played by two players. One player is white and one player is black. Each player plays one move at a time, and white moves first. The objective of the game is to checkmate your opponent's king. So you guys will learn later on today what checkmate means. But for now, just know that that's the objective. We want to checkmate the opponent's king. So chess is a board game, right? Chess is a board game. And here is a chessboard. The chessboard has 64 squares. It's an 8 by 8 chessboard. 8 times 8 is 64. So that gives 64 squares. So there's 8 rows on a chessboard. There's 8 columns on a chessboard. That makes 64 squares. And half of them are dark squares, half of them are white squares. I'm not sure why that is. It's probably so that it's easier to see. Anyway, it's also important that when you're setting up a chessboard, there must be a dark square on the bottom left. So here's the bottom left. This is called A1. This has to be a dark square. It can't be a light square. So that's one rule. And a little bit of chess terminology. A little bit of chess terminology. Each row is called a rank. And each column is called a file. Each column is called a file. And we have a way to notate, we have a way to write each chess square. So for example, the bottom left square is called A1. The bottom left square is called A1. The top right square is called H8. So as you can see, each of the rows we number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 8. Each of the columns, we label them A, B, C, D, all the way to H. So that way, every single square gets a unique name. Every single square gets a unique name. And in this example, the names are already on the square. So for example, this square here is D5 because it's on column D, it's on file D, and it's on row 5 or rank 5 because if we remember, a row is called a rank and a column is called a file. Okay, so hopefully this is still simple enough. Hopefully this is still simple enough. Let's move on. Now we're going to add some chess pieces to the board to make it a little more interesting, because playing with an empty board is not very fun. We want to make it more fun. So there are 32 pieces, and each player, each side, has 16 pieces, as you can see here. So this example here, this is how to set up the chessboard. This is how to set up the chessboard. So white is on the bottom. White's on the first and second rank. Remember, rank means row. So you see this says 1 and this says 2. White is on rank 1 and rank 2. Black is on rank 7 and rank 8. So that's what you need to remember. Also, white has 8 pawns. Black has 8 pawns. Both sides, each side has 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, a queen, and a king. So we're gonna learn more about those pieces later. But either way, it's important that you know how to set up a chessboard. It's just memorization. After a while, you'll be able to perfectly set up a chessboard, and that's good. So you guys might not know how these chess pieces move. Good news, you're about to find out. So, meet the chess pieces. There are 6 different chess pieces: a pawn, a rook, a knight, a bishop, a queen, and a king. 6 different chess pieces. And the pawn is the shortest one, and the king is the tallest one. So these are the 6 chess pieces. You don't really need to know how they're spelled yet, but I just put it here so you guys can see. And before we know how each chess piece moves, we need to know what a capture is. So chess pieces can capture other chess pieces. So you can think about it as they just land on that square. You see, so here we have a knight. We have a knight on d5, where I'm pointing. We have a knight on d5, and it can capture the queen on f6. And so this is what this board is what it looks like before the capture. And then this board is what it looks like after the capture. So it looks like the queen just totally disappeared. That's what happens when you capture a piece. When you capture a piece, that piece disappears. So that's why it's good to capture chess pieces, because you want to make your opponent's pieces disappear. That way, you'll have more pieces than your opponent. So this is an example of what a capture is. Now we can start learning how the chess pieces move. First of all, we have the rook. The rook. This is what it looks like in real life. This is what it looks like online. And the rook is very simple. It's very simple. It just moves up or down or left or right in a straight line. So in this case, the arrows represent its direction of movement. The arrows represent its direction of movement. The rook cannot jump over pieces. You can kind of think about the rook as having very good eyesight, because it's from here, it can look all the way here. So it's on the square f2, it can look all the way to f8, it can look all the way to a2, so it has very good eyesight. But unfortunately, if there's a piece that's blocking its eyesight, it cannot look beyond that piece. because it cannot see through chess pieces. Most chess pieces cannot see through other chess pieces, because that wouldn't be fair. So, so yeah, the rook is very simple. It just moves up, down, left, and right, and it cannot jump over pieces. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys an example of how a rook moves. So, are you guys able to see my? Are you guys able to see that my screen changed? Oh, okay. Okay, let me change something. There's a technical difficulty. Just give me a second. Mm. Now, okay, now are you guys able to see something new? Good, good. Yes, all right. So here I have an example of a rook. This is a rook. The first question is, what square is this rook on? What square is this rook on? Type it in the chat. Okay, we're getting a lot of answers. That's good. That's good. The rook, the rook is on d3. Here's why it's on d3. So it's on the d file. It's on the d file, and it's on the third rank. So it's on d3. Good job. Second question is, how many different squares can the rook move to? How many different squares can the rook move to? You're gonna have to count a little bit for this one. So some people are saying 16, some people are saying 14, someone said 2. So a lot of different answers. A lot of different answers. Seems like most people are saying 14. Well, yeah, 14 is the correct answer. The rook can move to 14 different squares if you do the math. So I'm going to list out all the possible squares. So remember, the rook moves up, it could move down, it could move left, it could move right. So in this case, the rook can move one square up to d4. It can move two squares up to d5. It can move to d6, d7, d8, d2, d1. But that's only 7. But the rook can also move sideways. The rook can also move sideways. It can move here. It can move to here. It can move to a3, e3, f3, g3, h3. So that adds up to 14. That adds up to 14. The rook can move to 14 different places. So, and one, I just want to make something clear. The rook can not move to all 14 places at the same time, because that's a little weird. The rook can only move to one square for each move, but it has 14 different options as to what square it wants to move to. It has 14 options. Just to make that a little clearer. Okay. Let me see. Moving on. Moving on. Moving on. All right. Here's a similar example with the rook. Here's a similar example with the rook. How many squares, how many different squares can the rook move to in this position? Okay, the correct answer is 10. Good job to those of you that got it. 10. 10 squares. Let's see which 10 squares the rook can move to. So, the rook can move up 1 square, can move up 2 squares, it can move up 3 squares and capture that pawn. Because that pawn, so you see this is a white rook, that pawn is a black pawn. You can, and if you're white, if you have the white pieces, the rook is your rook. But the black pawn is your opponent's pawn. And since you want to beat your opponent in a chess game, you want to capture as many pieces as you can. So the rook is able to capture that pawn. The rook is able to capture the black pawn because it's your opponent's pawn. So that's 3 squares, and then it could also move down 1, down 2, sideways, 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 and sideways. Can the rook capture this pawn? Yes or no? No, 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 no. The rook cannot capture this pawn because both the rook and the pawn are your pieces. And you don't want to capture, you're not allowed to capture your own pieces because that would just make your army smaller. Because at the start of the chess game, you only have 16, your army only has 16 pieces. You don't want to capture your own pieces. That would make the army smaller. So the rook cannot capture that pawn. The furthest the rook can move in this direction is to here. And that adds up to 10 different squares. That adds up to 10 different squares. Very good. Very good. We're doing very well right now. Okay. A couple more examples. Couple more examples. So, we have a rook here on d3, and the rook wants to get to this square on f7. How many moves? What is the fewest number of moves the rook must take to get from d3 to f7? It can get there really fast. Yes, 2 is the right answer. 2 is the right answer. 2 is the right answer. Here's the bonus question. Here's the bonus question. Find a way for the rook to get from d3 to f7 in 2 moves. So you have to use chess notation. Where does the rook move first? And then where does the rook move next? So you see the rook's here, right? And wants to get this square on f7. Remember, the rook moves in straight lines. Moves in straight lines. So there are 2 ways to make the rook move from here to f7. The rook can move to f3 and then to f7, or the rook can move first to d7 and then to f7. So there are 2 different ways for the rook to move from d3 to f7. So that's just a little navigation problem. It should not be too difficult. So let's move on. Here's another example. So now we have some chess pieces in the way of the rook, but it still wants to go from d3 to f7. Still wants to go from d3 to f7. Find a way to get from d3 to f7 in the fewest possible number of moves. So yeah, it can get from d3 to f7 in 3 moves. Now we need to find a way for it to do that. We need to find a way. Yeah, the rook can move from d3 to f7 in 3 moves. Now find a a path that the rook must take, that the rook can take. Find a path. That's the bonus question. Okay, we got a couple answers now. There's many different paths. There's many different paths. This one's a little trickier because you have to navigate through a lot of different stuff. I'm gonna give you guys a couple more seconds. Okay. Seems like this one was a little difficult. That's okay. Alright, so let me explain this one to make it a little more clear. Here's a rook. Here's our rook. Wants to go to f7. In the previous example, we only needed 2 ways. We only needed 2 moves. And there were 2 ways. We only needed 2 moves in the previous example. Because the rook was moving here. But now we have a pawn. We have our own pawn here. So the rook cannot move here. That makes it a little harder. The rook also cannot move here because the pawn is blocking the rook's eyesight. The pawn is blocking the rook's eyesight. It cannot move here. So we need to try to sidestep in some way. Here's how we can sidestep. We can move up one. We can move up one. Now we can move right. Now we can move up. Right? So we can move to d4, and then to f4, and then to f7. Or we can move to d5, then to f5, and then to f7. Okay? There's a couple different ways. But there's even more ways. There's more than 2 ways this time. There's more than 2 ways. We can move to the side. We can move to the side, then move up and then to f7. That's still 3 moves. We can move to c3 to c7 then f7. We can move to b3 to b7 and then f7. And we can move to a3, a7, and then f7. Okay? So there's actually, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 ways. There's 6 ways to move from d3 to f7. 6 ways. A lot of different ways. That one was a little tricky, but that's okay. That's okay. Because we're just getting started. We're just getting started. We're just getting started. That's only the first piece. It's only the first chess piece. Let's move on to the next one. The bishop. The bishop. The bishop. this is what the bishop looks like. This is what the bishop looks like. And online, this is what the bishop looks like. And as you can see, the bishop moves diagonally. The bishop moves diagonally. So it moves and captures diagonally. The bishop also cannot jump over other pieces. So yeah, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. It just moves and captures diagonally. Pretty simple. Let's do a couple examples on that. Let's do a couple examples. Okay. We have two bishops, don't we? We have two bishops. Let's start with this bishop in the middle. How many different squares? How many different squares can this bishop go to? This bishop in the middle. So it moves diagonally. It moves diagonally. The correct answer is 13. 13. 13 is the correct answer. Let's see why. Let's see why 13 is the right answer. Okay, so the bishop can move to e5. It can move to f6. It can move to g7. It can move to h8. It can move to c3. It can move to b2. It can move to a1. It can move to c5. It can move to b6, a7, e3, f2, and g1. Okay? So the bishop can move to 13 different squares, this bishop. Okay, well, this is a pretty simple, this next question is a pretty similar question. How many squares can this bishop move to? This bishop in the corner. Okay, a lot of you have gotten it right. A lot of you have gotten it right. The answer is 7. The answer is 7. It's not 13. It's not the same as the other bishop. That's a little tricky. That's a little bit tricky. You see, this bishop in the center can move to 13 different squares, but this bishop in the corner can only move to 7 different squares. It can only move to 7 different squares. It can move to g2 to f3 to e4 to d5 to c6 to b7 and to a8. And if it does move to a8, that's the longest possible move you can make on the chessboard, moving diagonally. Because a square's diagonal is longer than a square's side. So moving from h1 to a8 is the longest possible move you can make on a chessboard. Anyway, that's a little bit about bishops. It's a little bit about bishops. Okay, what about this position? Here's our bishop on b2. How many different squares can this bishop go to? The bishop can move diagonally. It can move it moves like a cross, like an X. It moves like an X. The answer is 4. The bishop can move to 4 different squares. Right? It can move here, it can move to c3, it can move to a3, it can move to a1, it can move to c1. It cannot move to d4. It cannot capture d4 because this pawn is our pawn. It's the same color as the bishop, so it cannot capture that pawn. And the pawn is blocking the bishop, so it cannot move further either. Okay, so the bishop can only move to 4 different squares. It's very restricted. Moving on. Moving on. Moving on. Okay. Okay, let's do this. We have a bishop on b2, and we want to get that bishop to h2. How do we do that in the quickest way possible? Find a path for the bishop. Find a path for the bishop. Okay, we have one correct answer already. Very quick thinking there. Very quick thinking. Good stuff. Okay, so our bishop wants to move. Our bishop's on b2, wants to move to h2. Wants to move to h2. Here's how we can do it the quickest. We go up and then down. Then we're already there. Just takes 2 moves. Just takes 2 moves. We go to e5, then we go to h2. 2 moves. 2 moves. Okay? 2 moves. That is not too difficult. What about this next one? This next one's a little more difficult. This next one is a little harder. Find the path for the bishop to move from b2 to h2. Find the path for the bishop to move from b2 to h2. Find a path for the bishop. A path. A path is harder to find. Yes, we have one correct path, but there's actually 2 correct paths. Are you guys able to figure out the second correct path? The second fastest path? Yes, yes, yes. Very good. Very good. There's 2 ways. So first of all, the shortest number of moves for the bishop to go from b2 to h2 is 3, right? Because the bishop cannot capture this pawn. Bishop cannot capture this pawn. So it can move here, then down, and then here. That's 3 moves. Right? It can move to d4 to g1 and then to h2. Or it can move the c1, f4, and then to h2. That's the answer. 2 different answers. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's move on. Next piece is the queen. Next piece is the queen, okay? This is what the queen looks like in real life. This is what the queen looks like online. All right? This is what the queen looks like online. So the queen, it moves and captures in straight lines and diagonally. So it moves like a rook. It moves like a rook and like a bishop. Because it can move like it can move up, down, left, right, and it can move diagonally. So it's literally just a rook plus a bishop. A queen is literally just a rook plus a bishop. So queen is very powerful. Queen is the most powerful chess piece. The queen is the most powerful chess piece. You see how many squares the queen can go to? Queen can go to a lot of different squares. But it cannot jump over chess pieces. The queen cannot jump over chess pieces. Okay, let's look at the queen. Let's look at the queen. Let's look at the queen, okay? How many different squares can this queen move to? How many different squares? How many different squares? Yes. Yes, yes. The correct answer is 21. The correct answer is 21. Let's see how we can count 21 squares. Can move to A2, can move to A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, B1, C1, D1, E1, F1, G1, H1, B2, C3. Okay, that's C3. C3, D4, E5, F6, G7, H8. The queen can move to 21 different squares. 21 different squares. Very, very powerful chess piece. Very, very powerful. Okay. Okay, okay. We're doing very well right now. Let's move on to the next chess piece. The knight. The knight. Okay? This is what the knight looks like online. And this is what the knight looks like in person, if you guys can see it. It's kind of hard to see, but that's a knight. That's a green knight. Okay? And I also have a black knight, but it turned into a unicorn. Either way. Either way, the knight moves in an L shape. The knight moves in an L shape. What does that mean? Well, this is an L, right? So it moves. Well, it's kind of hard to describe in words, but if you guys look at the picture, the knight can move to these different squares, right? Because an L is like one left, two up, or one right, two up, and so on and so forth. It just moves one square one direction and then two squares in the other. And yeah, it looks like this. It looks the knight can move to d4, f4, c3, g3, c1, and g1. You just need to kind of memorize how the knight moves because the knight is a very tricky piece. The knight is a very, very tricky piece. It's not the most powerful piece. The knight is not the most powerful piece, but it's the trickiest. And here's why the knight is the trickiest. The knight can jump over pieces. The knight can jump over pieces. It's the only piece that can jump over pieces. Even the queen is the most powerful piece. The queen cannot jump over pieces, but the knight can jump over pieces. That's what makes the knight super tricky. So whenever your opponent has a knight, you have to watch out a little bit. Okay? Let's look at a few examples of the knight. The knight. Okay, here we have a knight on d4. How many different squares can the knight go to? Yes, yes. The correct answer is 8. 8. Knight can go to 8 different squares. Okay? Can go to e6, f5, f3, e2, c2, b3, b5, and c6. These are the only 8 different squares the knight can go to. These are the only 8. So that's how a knight moves. That's how a knight moves. Okay? 8 squares. What about now? Here's our knight. Here's our knight. How many different squares can the knight move to now? A little tricky. Little tricky. Little tricky. But it's not that hard. Alright, the answer is 8. The answer is still 8. The answer is still 8. Even though the knight is completely surrounded. Do you see that? The knight is completely surrounded by his own chess pieces. But the knight can jump over chess pieces. The knight can jump over chess pieces. So it can still move to 8 different squares. The knight can jump over chess pieces. It can still move to 8 different squares. That's important. Okay. 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 Okay, this is a tricky one. This is a little tricky. How many different squares can the knight move to here? This is a little more tricky. But it's still doable. It's still doable. Yes. Answer is 4. Answer is 4, because remember, chess pieces cannot capture the pieces of the same color because they're on the same army, they're on the same side. So the knight cannot capture the white pawns. The white knight cannot capture the white pawns because the pawns are on the same the pawns are on the same army as the knights. Right? Chess is a battle of two armies. The two armies want to defeat each other. If one army is defeating itself, that it doesn't work like that. So one army cannot capture its own piece. The knight cannot capture its own pawn. But the knight can capture the opponent's pawns. The knight really wants to capture the opponent's pawns. So, yeah. There are 4 different squares the knight can jump to here. It can jump to c5, d6, f6, and g5. It cannot capture the white pawns, but it can capture the black. Wait, it can capture the black pawns. It can capture the black pawn. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is a tricky one. This is a tricky one. Our knight is on d4, and we want to bring the knight to f6. Very close, right? The knight's very close to f6. It's only 2 squares away. But find a way to do that in the quickest number of moves. Find a path. Find a path. This one is the hardest puzzle I've given so far. Find a path for the knight to go from d4 to f6. Okay, we have one path. We have another path. A lot of different paths. Yeah, this one is a tricky one. First of all, we need to know the minimum number of moves it takes for the knight to jump to f6. It's 4. It takes at least 4 moves. 4 moves, even though f6 is so close to the knight. Even though the knight is so close to f6. It takes 4 moves. Okay. For a bishop would just be able to go there in one move, right? For a knight, it takes 4 moves. Let me show you how. Okay, the knight can go here, can go here, and here, and then here. That's one way. That's one way to get there in 4 moves. Or it could go another way. Or it could go something like this. There's so many different ways, but it's still kind of tricky to find even one because the knight just moves so weirdly. Either way, it takes 4 moves for the knight to jump from d4 to f6. 4 moves. Okay. Okay, we have 2 more chess pieces. We have 2 more chess pieces. The king. The king. The king is the most important chess piece. So it moves and captures one square in any direction. It's the most important chess piece. Checkmating the opponent's king wins the chess game. That's why it's the most important. You win a chess game by checkmating your opponent's king. Also, the king cannot be captured, but it cannot move to any square that the opponent's piece controls. Okay? It cannot move to any square that the opponent's piece controls, because then it would be captured. Okay. That's how the king works. It's a very important one. Very important chess piece. It's the most important chess piece. Look at the king. Look at the king. Here's a tricky one. How many different squares can this king move to? It's a tricky one. Okay. Answer is 3. Answer is 3. Here's why the answer is 3. First of all, king can move to d5, f4, and f5. But we also need to figure out why it cannot move to these squares. Right? Because we did say the king can move one square in any direction. But look at this. If the king moves here, the bishop can capture it. So the king cannot move here. The king cannot move here. The king cannot move to any square that's controlled by the opponent's piece. Okay, this bishop controls all of these squares. What about this rook? This rook controls all of these squares. Okay, so all of the red squares are controlled by the opponent's pieces. The king cannot go to those red squares. The king cannot. So it could only go here, here, or here. There's only 3 different squares. It's only 3 different squares. What about now? What about now? How many squares can the king move to? Okay, a lot of different answers. Only one correct answer, though. The answer is 4. The answer is 4. King can move to 4 different squares. The king can capture the rook, can move back to e3, can move to f3, and can move to f5. Can move to f5. Now let's look at what squares the opponent's pieces are controlling. Okay, this rook is controlling this square. It's controlling the bishop. It's controlling these 2 squares as well. This bishop is controlling this square and this square. Okay, So all of the red squares the king cannot move to because it's controlled by the opponent's pieces. But the king can move to d5, can move backwards here, and it can move here. The king can move to f5. The rook cannot capture the king because the rook cannot jump over the bishop. So that's why the king only has 4 squares it can go to. Okay. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay. So there's one more important rule for the king, but we're gonna learn about that next class. Because the other rule for the king, the one more important rule, it's a little complicated. It's a little complicated. Anyway, let's move on to the last chess piece, the pawn. The pawn. So this is what the pawn looks like. And this is what the pawn looks like online. And okay, I don't really have a pawn right now, but okay. So the pawn is a little tricky. The pawn is a little bit tricky, but basically, if it's on its starting square, it has 2 places it can go. It can either move up 1 square or move up 2 squares. Like you see this pawn on d2 can either move up 1 square to d3 or 2 squares to d4. And the pawn can only move up. The pawn can only move up the board relative to the player. So you see the white pawn on d2 moving up means moving to the 8th rank. But the black pawn on f7 moving up means moving up to the 1st rank. Because the white player in this position, the white player is on the bottom. And so moving up means moving up to the 8th rank. But the black player is on the top. The black player is on the top, so moving up means moving up the 1st rank. Up to the 1st rank. So that's one important thing. And yeah, if the pawn is on its starting square, remember the white pawns all start on the 2nd rank. The black pawns all start on the 7th rank. So this white pawn's on its starting square. It can move 1 square up or 2 squares up. It can move 1 square up or 2 squares up. Same for this black pawn. This black pawn is on its starting square. It can move 1 square up or 2 squares up. Okay. Okay, good. But if it's not on its starting square, it can only move 1 square up. This is very important. It's pretty tricky. That's why I'm saving this for the last. It's pretty tricky. If the pawn is not on its starting square, it can only move 1 square up. It cannot move 2 squares up. If the pawn is not on its starting square, it cannot move 2 squares up. So that's how the pawn moves, but we also have to learn how the pawn captures. Okay, let me see if I have any examples of that. Okay, let's go back to this. Okay, we have a pawn on d4. Now it can move 1 square forward to d5, right? It can move 1 square forward to d5. But since it's not on its starting square, the pawn on d4 is not on its starting square. It cannot move 2 squares forward. Okay, and now let's learn about how the pawn captures chess pieces. Okay, you see there's a black rook on c5 and a black knight on e5, right? The pawn can capture 1 square diagonally. That's how the pawn captures chess pieces. The pawn captures 1 square diagonally. So the pawn can capture the rook or the pawn can capture the knight. And the tricky thing is, if the pawn is not capturing a chess piece, it cannot move diagonally. But if it is capturing a chess piece, it can move diagonally, like it does. So the pawn captures diagonally, but it moves forward. The pawn moves forward and captures diagonally. And it captures diagonally one square forward from the player's perspective. So this white pawn on d4 captures diagonally one square to the left, captures diagonally one square to the right. This black pawn on g4, now from the black perspective, now the pawn is moving this way. It's moving down. It's moving down to the first rank. So this black pawn can capture one square diagonally and take the queen. Or it can capture one square diagonally and take the bishop. Or it can move one square forward. And because the pawn is not on its starting square, it cannot move two squares forward. Okay? So that's a little bit tricky, but that's okay. Let's do a couple examples. Okay, we have a white pawn. We have a white pawn on e2. How many different squares can this pawn go to? How many different options? How many different options? So the white pawn is on its starting square. The white pawn is on its starting square. Okay, there are four options. Four options. Let's look at this. First of all, the pawn can move one square up, but it can also move two squares up because it's on its starting square. The pawn is on its starting square. Okay. Or it can capture this pawn by moving one square diagonally forward. Or it can capture this pawn by moving one square diagonally forward. So there's four different options for the pawn. Four different options. Okay. Okay. One more rule for the pawn. Promotion. Pawn promotion. So that's when a pawn is on, it's almost at the top of the board from the player's perspective. So if the white pawn is on the 7th rank, then if it moves to the 8th rank, it turns into another piece. It can either turn into a queen, a rook, a bishop, or a knight. Okay? If the white pawn is on the 7th rank, if it moves to the 8th rank, it can turn into a queen, a rook, a bishop, or a knight. And similarly, for the black pawn, it's on the 2nd rank, and if the black pawn moves to the 1st rank, it can turn into a queen, a rook, a bishop, or a knight. Okay? So this is a very interesting rule. So, yeah, that's how the pawn works. So the pawn has a lot of rules, but that's okay. So, we are a little out of time right now. Let me see if I could. I'm going to try to cover a little bit more. So we know how all the chess pieces move, right? We know how the queen, the rook, the bishop, the knight, the king, and the pawn, we know how they all move. Okay, but that's not all. That's not all. We need to know what check is. So check, a player's king, the king is in check if the opponent's piece is threatening to capture the king. The king is in check if the opponent's piece is threatening to capture the king. Okay, so look at this board. This board is an example. We have a white king on e1, a black bishop on b4. This bishop's threatening to capture the white king. Remember, bishops move diagonally. This bishop can capture the white king if it were black's turn. And that's not allowed. So white must get out of check in some way. And there are three different ways the white king can get out of check. The first way, you can just capture the piece that's checking the white king. So in this case, the black bishop's checking the king on e1. Our rook can capture that bishop, and the king will not be in check anymore. Or we can block a check. See, this bishop is attacking the king. It's checking the king. The knight, our knight, can jump to d2, and that would block the bishop from attacking the king. And the third way to get out of check is just for the king to sidestep and move out of check. You see, so this bishop is still attacking the king. The king can just move to f1, then it's out of check. Then it's out of check. So those are the three ways that the king can get out of check. And if someone is in check, if a king is in check, it must get out of check in some way. It must. That's one of the rules of chess. It must get out of check in some ways. In some way. And these are the three different ways it can get out of check. So, a natural question is, what happens if the king cannot get out of check? What happens if the king cannot get out of check? Okay, well, then that's checkmate. If the king cannot get out of check, then the king is checkmated. Okay, checkmate wins the game, right? So if a player here, the white knight is checking the black king, right? The white knight is checking the black king. Okay, there are three ways for the king to get out of check. Three possible ways. The first way is to capture the knight. Well, black cannot capture the knight. The second way is to block the check. Well, there's no way to block a knight check because knights can jump over pieces. And then the third way is to move the king. And unfortunately for the black king, the king cannot move to anywhere since it cannot capture its own pieces. So in this case, the king cannot get out of check. The king is checkmated. Black is checkmated. And in this position, white wins and black loses. White wins and black loses. So that's checkmate. All right, that's checkmate. That is checkmate. And with that, I think we can call it a day. I think we can call it a day. So those are all the basic rules of chess, or almost all of them. Next class, you guys are gonna finish up the basic rules of chess, but I think that's all you need to know for you guys to start playing chess. All you guys need to know. So, there are a lot of different ways to play chess. One of the best ways to play chess, one of the best places to play chess is on chesskid.com. Chesskid.com. You might want to create an account on chesskid.com because there's a lot of different kids on there playing chess, and it's a great way to get practice because the only way to get good at chess, there's only one way, is to do a lot of chess. It's to practice chess, it's to play chess, it's to learn from your mistakes, it's to review, it's to learn. That's the only way. And you might also want to create an account on chess.com. Chess.com. Chess.com is the world's leading chess website. There are over 200 million people on chess.com. So you guys have plenty of opportunities. And on chess.com and on ChessKid, you guys can play against people from around the world just by clicking play, as long as you make your account. So those are some really good ways to get practice in before the next class. And yeah, with that, thank you guys for joining this session. I hope you learned something. And yeah, bye.